Good morning. And remember, I'm a native New Yorker. Please do not speak harshly about our weather. Hurts me. This is the April showers that always bring May flowers. First of all, those of our students who are working with tapes and tape recordings, I hope you're taking the advantage of the opportunity of meeting Emma Lindsay and talking with her about those things, because she is the one qualified to talk about them. She's working with them all day and much of the night, and can give you help if there's any you need. Besides, she's nice to talk to. And another thing has come up. One of the biggest subjects in this work is the subject of children. And of course, it's something of which I'm entirely ignorant. Not that I wasn't one, but I wasn't a normal one, I guess, because I didn't get into the little mischievous experiences that most of them do. I like books too much. And so I don't know much about children. I've never been a success at raising any, so I have nothing to offer in that line. And when it comes to the matter of teaching them truth, metaphysics, it has been a conviction for many, many years that this is a function not of teachers but of parents. I may not know anything about it. Nevertheless, it's my conviction that Sunday schools can play but a very small part in raising and teaching children along spiritual lines. For this reason, that living a spiritual life hasn't much to do with an hour a week of instruction. It has to do with the state of consciousness of the mother and sometimes the father, and that is an influence that goes on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. If a spiritual teaching is good enough for you, it would appear to me that it is good enough for you to teach your children. Or if a spiritual teaching is relied upon by you, it would seem that you would want your children to rely upon that same spiritual teaching, and therefore you would wish to impart it to them. And that, of course, is an important thing, because it means that, first of all, you must learn it, practice it, live it, and thereby impart it. And all of that is said to you as a novice. But one of our students is kind of expert in that line, having had 3 very successful experiences with her own children and a daughter-in-law and son-in-law. She is well equipped to tell you her experiences in raising children spiritually and probably otherwise. And if you would meet Mrs. Eileen Bowden from Victoria, B.C., who is with us in this work and has been in practically all of our class work for many years, you will have the opportunity of meeting someone with practical experience in the subject of children from a spiritual standpoint. I'm sure there are others here too, but she's one that I know about, and she's nice to talk to too. Several of our ladies are nice to talk to when you get to really know them. All right. And don't forget questions, if you have any. Let me have them on the desk here. I said last night that there are two ways of living. We can live as human beings and benefit by whatever good winds blow, or be harmed by whatever bad winds blow, prosper in the booms and lose in the depressions. Or, if we turn to spiritual living, we can, at least in a great measure, be master of the conditions of the world, rise above them, have dominion over them, and avoid many of the evil experiences of the world, and bring to ourselves an abundance of the good, more especially of the spiritual good. And I have had this newspaper article for some time, and I would like to use this by way of illustration of that point in a way that perhaps would be a step beyond our evening class. This is a newspaper article on the subject, "Can prayer make plants grow?" Some of you, of course, will not be able to believe that any newspaper or magazine would publish such an article at this time, since it has been proved for the last 75 years that prayers can make plants grow. There isn't a question of doubt in the minds of anybody who has ever been touched by a metaphysical teaching that prayer can make plants grow. It has been so well established that I can't imagine such a thing even being news. I would have thought that all of the world, more especially the world of America, would know by now that prayer can make plants grow. Prayer can increase herds. Prayer can increase the milk, the amount of milk and the quality of milk that comes from our herds of cattle, our dairy cattle. Prayer can increase the amount of eggs and size of eggs that comes from our hens. Prayer can increase the quality and the quantity of flowers on bushes, or fruits on trees, or crops in the ground. Now, this isn't even a subject that is open to discussion or debate, except among those who either have willfully or ignorantly closed their eyes to this subject. This is a minister who says that prayer will make plants grow. And this article says that some people call it sacrilege. And others, of course, the physical scientists, say that it's impossible because the growth of plants is purely a physical process. And so for a long period of time, this minister and a group of his students have been conducting experiments. And, of course, they have proven beyond a question of doubt that prayer makes plants grow. Now, if that were the only question and the only issue, I wouldn't be bringing it to your attention this morning. Because I'm sure every one of you know that prayer makes plants grow, and I'm sure you know how to bring it about, how to pray. But here is the strange thing in this article. In their experiments, they have proven that prayer will make the plants grow But negative praying will stop plants growing. Right thoughts will make them grow. Wrong thoughts will stop them growing, in some cases even kill them. That's the reason that I'm bringing this to your attention today. May I assure you of this, that this minister knows nothing about prayer, nothing whatever, that this minister is making the common mistake of using right thinking or a mental process for growing plants and for preventing the growth of plants. Now that is the commonest mistake that is made on earth today, the belief that mental work is prayer, or that mental right thinking is prayer, or that willing a thing to happen is prayer, or visualizing it to happen is prayer, or thinking good thoughts about somebody or something is prayer. Now that is the point upon which the Infinite Way takes issue with virtually all teaching. The Infinite Way says that prayer is a contact with God, a communion with God, a conscious oneness with God, and therefore prayer cannot be used in one instance for good and in another instance for evil. Now this goes back to a statement that is to be found in miscellaneous writings by Mrs. Eddy, in which she says that the same mind that can do good can do evil. And that's absolutely true if you're talking about the human mind. The human mind can go through certain mental gyrations. It can think right thoughts or good thoughts. It can be very active in knowing the truth, and it can produce some very good results. But you could sit down the next day with the same mind, your own mind, because we were talking of your own mind when it was thinking good thoughts, right thoughts. But you could sit down the next day, if you liked, if you had the disposition, and you could think some negative thoughts. I shouldn't even say you could, I should say we do. And we produce negative results. Do you doubt that for 1 minute? That you can think negative thoughts and have negative results? Of course you don't. And you don't doubt either that you can think some right thoughts and have some good results. But in neither case are you praying. In both cases, you, with your human intellect, are making a choice between thinking good thoughts and evil thoughts. You are deciding whether you will bless someone or curse someone, or even whether you will bless yourself and your household, or whether you will curse yourself and your household. You may say, oh, I have never cursed my household, and I say you have. Because whenever you have indulged negative thinking, you have prevented the flow of the Spirit in your mind, in your body, in your household, in your children, in your affairs, and you have done what this minister has done. He has a set of plants here and another set of plants here, and students here think right thoughts, and students here think wrong thoughts. And these plants grow 4 inches larger than these. And so perhaps some of your tall children were produced when you were thinking right thoughts. Maybe we have had good children when we were thinking rightly and bad children when we were thinking wrongly. Because it is clear that you can sit before plants or dairy herds or chickens, and you can produce the image and likeness of your state of thought. Now, the negative thinking, of course, is what is known as mental malpractice. And there is a malicious malpractice, and there is an ignorant malpractice. There is a willful malpractice. There is an unconscious malpractice. We know when there are those people whom we do not like, or those candidates for political office, or offices in political places in power. We know whether we are mentally supporting them or making their way more difficult by our condemnation. We know that. What we do not often remember is that we have the power to uphold them or to depress them. We do not realize that with the right human thoughts about them, we could be giving them encouragement and support and sometimes even a greater sense of integrity, and that by a continuous malpractice that we can be making their way harder, more difficult. In the same way that a teacher can sit in the classroom and depress the entire classroom by her own mood, or raise it up if her mood is on the right side. All of this, remember, is purely human. That is the point that I'm trying to make to you, that in both cases it is a human activity. It is merely right thinking as against wrong thinking. Why do you think that our right thinking has a good effect on things and our wrong thinking has a bad effect? The reason is this. Mind and matter are the same thing. Thoughts are things. Thoughts, when they are to the point of conviction, become things. Any person in this world without a trace of God or Spirit in them can become successful if their thought is aimed in the direction of success. They can become successful by entertaining a success complex, by hungering after success, thirsting after success, devoting themselves to success, making of success a passion. They don't have to bring God into it. That is why we have successful whiskey makers. There's no God in that. But there is a drive for success, and men have it in many different fields. On the other hand, we have a world of failures brought about by an inferiority complex, by laziness, by indifference, sloth. Both of these come from a mental state of being, a mental attitude. Now, you produce humanly the image and likeness of your state of consciousness. Your state. And the more uplifted your state of consciousness is, the more on the right side will be the world that you produce. On the other hand, you can turn around tomorrow and take the same world and you can depress it by allowing yourself to indulge the negative side, the negative aspects of life, the hopelessness, the discouragement, the, well, what chance is there, and so forth and so on. All of this is human. The same mind that can do good can do evil. You yourself as an individual can, by purely human means that these people mistakenly call prayer, the same as New Thought work calls its work prayer, or some Christian Science treatments like to believe that they're prayer. Now, these are mental processes. They are not prayer. And they are subject to fluctuation. If you take these plants that are doing poorly and move them over to the students that are doing the right thinking, they all of a sudden will blossom. When you take those that are doing well and put them over on the shelf with those who are doing the wrong thinking, they will stop blossoming. So is your days and your nights and mine on the human plane. Now, for us in this work, there must be no reliance on good thinking or right thinking, nor must there be a fear of wrong thinking. There must be a lifting up of consciousness above both right thinking and wrong thinking into no thinking. I don't mean stopping human thought. Not at all. I have never found a successful way of stopping thought except the way that some of the Hindu yogis do it, and the result of that stopping thought is to destroy their minds and bodies. If you could see these men who have succeeded in stopping thought, you would advise them to get back into thinking, even if it's kind of bad thinking. It's better than no thinking or stopping thought. So I don't mean by no thinking stopping thought. I mean rising into an atmosphere of consciousness where conscious thought stops and the thought of God begins flowing into one's consciousness, where instead of actively thinking, you are actively listening and ultimately receiving the Word of God. And the nearest way that I can explain it to you is to think of a poet or a composer or a painter, sculptor, just before conception. Can you imagine their attitude of mind? There's no use of them thinking, because the only thing they could think would be something that already exists. You can't think about something that has no existence or never has had existence. You can only think about some experience of the past or present. And so if these gifted people indulged thought before conception, the only thing they'd think up is a copy of something that was already in existence. And so a composer, a poet, painter, sculptor, if they were true artists, would have to sit back very quietly and peacefully, get into something of a reverie, and invite inspiration to come to them. Invite the Lord to speak. Invite their particular source of inspiration, whatever it may be. Then, you see, a whole new composition would flash into the composer's thought. A whole new idea of a poem. A whole new idea of a picture, statue, play, whatever it might be. You know, as you read some of the great literature of the world, you'd be surprised how many original ideas have come to people, or how ideas have been originally clothed. And you'll know then that they weren't plagiarizing from each other. They were receiving a direct inspiration from some source. Reading some mystical verse lately, I came back to one of those wonderful poems in which is the line, "Before God was, I am." Now, you know, that poet didn't get that from any other poet that ever lived. He didn't think that up either, because you can't think that. That is a truth that is so profound that no man on the face of the globe could think it up. That would have to come right from the source itself. You think of Moses. I am that I am. Can you imagine him thinking that one up? Or Jesus, I and the Father are one. Thou seest me, thou seest the Father that sent me. Could any man on the face of the globe think such thoughts? No. They could receive them from the depths of inspiration from the Godhead. Now then, prayer is the activity of consciousness that makes it possible to bring the presence and power of God into our experience, but prayer has nothing to do with thought. Prayer has nothing to do with right thinking. Prayer has nothing to do with overcoming. Prayer has nothing to do with healing. Prayer has to do with communing with God, making contact with God, becoming an outlet through which God can function, becoming an instrument that God can use. Now, prayer cannot be used to make something grow or to prevent something growing. Prayer cannot be used to help someone on one occasion and hinder someone on another occasion. And so please always be alert that you realize the difference between thinking and praying. Do not believe for a moment that because we all use the words God, Christ, truth, prayer, spirituality, that we all mean the same thing. There are some teachings that claim that right thought is God. We all have a lot of gods in the world in that case, and some of our gods are going to become devils tomorrow. No, right thought isn't God. Right thinking isn't God. And none of these teachings that have to do with right thinking or changing your thought has to do with God. And I don't mean that it hasn't to do with producing good in our individual experience. Because if you can convince a person one way or another, or be convinced by your own thought that it pays to be honest, you're a little better off than you were before you believed it. But it has nothing to do with spirituality. And so again, when we come back to that subject of cosmic law, it isn't enough to remain in that first step in which you agree, yes, I've paid the penalty for my own wrong thinking or wrong doing or my own ignorance of life, and I can benefit by giving up that wrong thinking. Don't think for a moment that you're approaching heaven through that. No, you're approaching only human betterment. If you sow to the flesh, you will reap corruption. But if you start sowing good thoughts and good deeds, you will merely achieve becoming a good human, sometimes a better human or a healthier human. Do not confuse that with the next step. The next step is wiping out good thinking and bad thinking. The next step is not being concerned about whether the flowers are taller or shorter or have more blossoms or less blossoms. The next step is prayer, a conscious communion with God in which you have no object. No one must have an object in praying. Otherwise, it's praying with an E instead of an A. No one must be praying to make plants bigger, get more milk from their herds, or earn more dollars. No one must be praying to get better health or to reform someone. Oh, no. Prayer is for the purpose of communing with God, of bringing God to our individual experience, and letting God show itself forth through us as it does through the heavens and the firmament. Every appearance of discord will disappear. Every evidence of inharmony will disappear. If not 100% in the first 10 years of our study, or 20, be assured of this, that 75 or 80% of them will, and as time goes on, we might accomplish that 100, but it may take until the final ascension before we absolutely lose the complete sense of physicality. You must remember this. You must know why we have discords of any name or nature. Our discords come entirely from entertaining a material sense of existence. There isn't any one of us here who, although we say we haven't a material body, there isn't any one of us here who isn't entertaining a physical sense of body. And if you don't eat lunch by tonight, you're going to be very sure of it. Your stomach's going to tell you so. And if it doesn't, just wait till tomorrow and see if I'm not right. We are all entertaining a physical sense of body, but some to a greater degree than others. Because as you go forward in this work, you have a less physical sense of body, a less physical sense of existence. You become more and more aware of God as the central theme of life, of God as the substance of all form. That is why you can begin to do healing work. Your healing work progresses in proportion as you entertain less and less sense of the physical. When pain and pleasure becomes less important, that is because spiritual sense has become greater. When abundance or lack become less important, then is when there is a greater spiritual sense on the scene. And that doesn't mean now going from one extreme to the other and saying I just soon be sick as well, or I just soon be poor as have abundance. It means when thought is not centered on those as objects. In other words, when we can take each day's weather as it comes along without being too upset whether it suits our idea of good weather or bad weather. When we can take each day as it comes along without too much concentrated elation on the good or too much concentrated dejection over the evil, then they're losing their importance in our sight as objects, and the harmonies of the Spirit come into our experience. I think our biggest error is this. We have not fully accepted the fact that there is a spiritual kingdom. Or else we believe that the spiritual kingdom is a happy, healthy, wealthy, material kingdom. That isn't true. That is, however, our metaphysical belief. We really believe that if we could exchange our ills and poverties and unhappinesses for the opposite, that we would be attaining the kingdom of God that Jesus Christ preached. And I can assure you it isn't so. After these many years, I've met too many healthy people and wealthy people and humanly happy people to believe that that involves any degree of the kingdom of heaven. Now then, there is something called the kingdom of heaven, spiritual universe. And it has no relationship at all to happy, healthy, or wealthy humanhood. And yet, if you were to see the person who is enjoying the kingdom of heaven, you would find them presenting the appearance of a healthy body, economic abundance, all needs met, and otherwise a spirit of joy emanating from them. Now then, the big lesson from this is this. You can't use prayer for improving material conditions. You can't use prayer for making flowers grow. You can't use prayer for bringing about health or wealth, because that means you have an object. If you have an object, it is your object, your will, not God's, or not necessarily God's. It is you who are determining what the result is to be, and you are going to use God or the power or presence of God to bring about something that you have in mind. That isn't prayer. Prayer is conscious communion with God. Prayer is a relaxing in the arms of God, in the bosom of God. Prayer is a period in our experience when we have no desires, no objectives, no purposes. It is more or less like the child's hour, when it wants that last good night story or kiss and then go to sleep. It is just a period of peace when we want to tabernacle with God. The day is over, or the day is about to begin, and we want to rest in that divine spirit. There's no reason for it. There's no object. None at all. Not any more than the child that wants to sit in its mama's lap at night. Just to feel peace. Just to be at peace. Just to have that feeling of security that comes to the child when mama's sitting there. So it is with prayer. The life of prayer has no relationship to earth. And yet, the life of prayer results in an inner peace on earth, a peace that passeth understanding. In true prayer, you will find this. You will never be consciously aware of lacks or limitations, discords or inharmonies. There won't be any in your consciousness. There won't be any in your experience, because most of the time there won't be any you to experience it. It will be the presence of God overshadowing us. I repeat this to you so often, Paul's statement, I live, yet not I, Christ liveth my life. So I don't have a life, so I can't have an object of life. I can't have a desire. I can't have a motive. But I can let God fulfill itself in me in whatever direction it will. And please believe me, this is not impractical. This is very, very practical, because it makes all of our human relationships harmonious. It means that we have no designs on anyone, and those who have designs on us drop away from us, so that we find ourselves like this in association with those of the same mind, of the same spirit. We don't do that by right thinking. We don't prevent it by wrong thinking. We forget the thinking angle and relax. We relax in prayer, in communion with God. Now, there is a psychologist on the Pacific Coast connected with the Redlands University who for several years has been conducting experiments in what is called prayer therapy. And he's had remarkable results, as much as 60 and 70% of healings. I think it's almost 100% of healings of things like ulcers. And he has found a therapy that works. He works not with individuals, but with classes. And each member of the class is permitted to get off their chest whatever is there. And then, of course, begins the idea of suggesting to them that they be more loving at home and more patient and remembering that there is a God and so forth and so forth. And the first thing you know, these people have given up that sense of selfhood that was limited, confined within their own body. They're commencing to be aware that they have a wife or a husband or child at home, and more aware that they have neighbors with whom they ought to be more neighborly or loving. And he helps them to overcome bias and bigotry, ignorance, fears, washes away many of their fears. And the first thing you know, they blossom out into 60 or 70% of greater health. Now, the man is doing a very fine work, and it is possible, with the attention that he is receiving, that other universities will be led to take up those things. And one thing can certainly be said for it: he turns their thought more away from themselves than they have ever known, and he introduces the word God and prayer into their consciousness more times a week than Sunday, and with much more faith than their minister can give them, because their minister can't have much faith that prayer works. But with his concept of prayer, he does have faith in it, and he can impart a faith in prayer. So that to that extent he's doing a great work. But it is called prayer therapy, and it is mental adjustment, mental right thinking. It is being a good neighbor. It is being a good wife or a good husband or a good child. It is called prayer therapy. I have been asked several times to talk to an institution here that also has what they call spiritual healing. God forbid that the word spiritual should be applied to it. It is every type of mental hocus pocus, from holding an image in mind to holding a vacuum in mind, and reciting poetry from one teacher and looking at paintings from another teacher, and all kinds of mental hocus pocus. But it's called spiritual healing because it doesn't use medicine. Anything that doesn't use medicine is spiritual healing. Now, I'm bringing this to your attention, not in ridicule, not in judgment, not in criticism. They are doing a fine work on their level. I'm bringing this to your attention because we're teaching the infinite way. And I will have it very clear in your thought that none of that is prayer healing, and none of that is spiritual healing, even though it's a fine thing to get rid of ulcers or consumption or cancers, regardless of how you do it. Now, when you think in terms of prayer, do not think in terms of praying for something. Do not think in terms of having an object of prayer. Think of God as something sacred, not as a banker from whom you want a loan or a relative from whom you want a gift. God is a sacred relationship, and results, if you have no object in going to God, it will result in an inner warmth and a union. You will find a communion, an inner communion, that is as beautiful as holding hands with your best beloved. But not for any object, for the purpose of communion. That communion can be trusted to lead you beside the still waters. It will take you into green pastures. But don't ask for it. Just seek the communion, not the green pastures or the still waters, because in order to reach green pastures and still waters, you may have to take a roundabout way for a while and get into all the briar patches. And don't try to avoid them. Don't try to avoid them. Let life unfold as it will. Take advantage of every experience that there is. You must remember this, that there are many of us in this work who would not be here today if we hadn't been either ill, sometimes under death's door, or if we hadn't been in sin to such a degree that there was really no hope for us, or if we hadn't been in such poverty as would indicate that we never were going to get out. And so therefore, those very adverse circumstances were the very blessings that led us here. There's no need to try to avoid those. The thing to do is not try to avoid one thing or to attain another thing, but rather to live every moment of every day as if we were living in God. And let the afflictions go in their timely way. Let me explain that to you. Everything that takes place in our experience takes place as a state of consciousness. For instance, if you have a child in grammar school, do not seek next year to put him in college, because although the wisdoms are all there and all the knowledges and all the books and in all the teachers, your child isn't going to get it. That child has to unfold through the high school years in order to be ready to absorb what lies in the college years. And so it is. Life is a school of experience. Every one of us here is in a school of experience. And we are the direct result of the state of consciousness that we have known in previous existence, and let no one doubt that they have lived before. It isn't possible for God's life to begin. It isn't possible for God's life to end. If you have any hope of immortality, please believe me that it is groundless and fruitless and hopeless, unless you can also accept the fact that your life never began. You cannot have an endless life from here on in unless you had a beginningless life up to this point. Life can't begin at a certain point and go on forever. Life is God, and life never had a beginning, and life will never have an ending, and life is consciousness. Therefore, you have always had conscious life the same length of time as God has had. You are as old as God is not merely a cliche from metaphysics, but it is a truth. You are as old as God. You have been having experiences that led you to this point. If that weren't so, there would not be room in the Yankee Stadium for all of the people who would be taking this class, because everyone in this city wants that which we get. But they do not want our way of getting it. And that is because their consciousness has not been prepared for it. Every grammar school child would like to have the knowledge of college, but they cannot have it until they are prepared for it. And so it is that human beings who have not yet been turned to the higher teachings, it's only because they have not yet spiritually matured enough to be able to accept them, absorb them, understand them, even if they read them. Have you never met anyone and given them a book of truth and had them say, "That's Greek, I don't understand a word of it"? You probably have. And that was because there was no spiritual maturity. On the other hand, have you not given a book or pamphlet to others and have them say, well, that's what I've known all the time, well, that's what I've always believed, only I didn't know how to put it into words. You summed it up for me. Well, there is a spiritual maturity, a readiness for the work. So it is. The spiritual harmonies that are to come into your experience cannot come before there is a spiritual readiness for those harmonies. You can't skip classes. What we are doing when we come to class, what we do when we read the writings, what we do when we meditate, is enrich consciousness. We don't make demonstrations, even though they may appear to be. Several times in these last few months, people have written me of problems of supply, and then, by some strange miracle, found brand new $10 or $20 or $50 bills, $100 bills, in their purse or on the floor, with absolutely no human way of it being there or reaching them. And sometimes, I'm afraid, these people may believe that it's a demonstration of the infinite way. No, it's a demonstration of their state of consciousness. Because as we come to the highly developed spiritual consciousness, there will be no need to earn money. If money is needed, we will have it without earning it. And even without receiving gifts of it and without inheriting it. Because there isn't a reason in the world why it doesn't just float down through the air to us. It can. It absolutely can. It's a matter of consciousness. The depth of our spiritual consciousness results in the depth and degree of the unfolded spiritual good coming into our experience. So we cannot demonstrate anything. We cannot demonstrate any condition. We can only demonstrate a degree of spiritual consciousness, and that developed or unfolded or revealed state of consciousness appears outwardly as health of body or supply. Moses did not demonstrate manna falling from the sky. He demonstrated a state of spiritual consciousness which we may call omnipresence. In that state of consciousness, everything necessary to his unfoldment was present. His consciousness appeared outwardly as manna, as a way through the sea, as water. Later on, Elijah demonstrated the same thing. Elijah didn't demonstrate oil flowing out of a cruse. Elijah demonstrated a state of consciousness of omnipresence of good. And so if oil had to flow, it was oil. If it was cakes baked on the stones, it was cakes baked on the stones. It would have made no difference. If he needed rain, it would have been rain. If he needed sunshine, it would have been sunshine, because he wasn't demonstrating those things. He was demonstrating a consciousness of the omnipresence of good. Jesus did the same thing. He did not multiply loaves and fishes. All he did was lift up his eyes to heaven, which means he lifted his eyes above the appearances and realized omnipresence. His consciousness was the mind of God. There's no lack in the mind of God. And the mind of God, you see, doesn't only make manna, it makes gold, silver, uranium, oil. The mind of God makes everything, and not according to what man believes. Someone sent me a clipping from the Encyclopedia Britannica, from an old copy of the Encyclopedia Britannica some time ago, undoubtedly written by physical scientists, speaking of uranium and saying, of course, none could be found in the United States. Of course not. According to their standards, there's been lots of it found here. But it just couldn't be, because it isn't part of the soil of the United States. Oh, they believed it. Of course they did. Now, never believe that God can't send us gold, silver, copper, or food, or clothing. God doesn't send it. God appears as it. But what is God? Your spiritual state of consciousness. God is your own consciousness. Therefore, when you understand or attain a measure of God consciousness, you have attained a consciousness of infinite abundance, omnipresent, in any form or every form. A new heart, a new brain, a new eye, a new dollar, a new home, anything, everything that you can want. But you cannot demonstrate these things. You cannot demonstrate beyond the possibilities. The possibilities are demonstrating God, demonstrating God consciousness. And how do you do that? Through prayer. In prayer, you unite with God so that God becomes consciously your mind, your soul, your spirit, your consciousness, your existence, your allness of being. Then when God is your being, infinity appears. It externalizes itself as the harmonies of being. Well, the lady says the time is up. Thank you